Hi, and welcome to the She Geeks Out podcast, where we geek out about workplace inclusion and talk with brilliant humans doing great work, making the world a better and brighter place. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Felicia. Our guest today is Chris Haigh, someone we have known forever. We've actually podcasted with Chris previously, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. But in this episode, we're catching up after several years to find out what is Chris up to, where in the world are they, and what are they focused on these days. We get into a deep discussion about DEI and how the work has shifted over time, especially after 2020, and the dramatic shift towards DEI work across the board, followed by the subsequent shift away. We talk about DEI as an industry, whether or not it's possible to engage in this kind of work in a capitalist society, and then we finish up with some thoughts on what the future has in store for all of us. But before we get into that, what are we getting into, Rachel?
I don't know. It's Monday, January 12th, in the year of our Lord 2026, as we record this. And, 2026 coming in hot.
Yeah, coming in very hot.
Very spicy.
Very spicy in a bad way. I like spice in my life, but not this kind of spice. So,
Well, I will share with you some information I have not shared with you. So I actually went to a little networking event last
yeah.
week. It's
In
called From the
person.
in the Flesh.
Wow.
Yes. So it was really cool. It was from the Parlay House. They have chapters in a variety of cities, and San Diego is one of the newest chapters. And the theme, as they do monthly in-person events, and the theme for January was basically burning the things that you don't like, the ideas that you are not interested in carrying with you into 2026.
Like actually burning or metaphorically burning?
No, actually burning pieces of paper that say the thing, not
Right.
physically burning the things that were on the pieces of paper.
Well, yeah,
That would
that's what I meant.
Yes, because that would be very dangerous, and I think, especially given what they said, very impossible. So, but it was great. There were probably
It's
about
fun.
20. Yeah. There were probably about 20 of us. And then after we did that, we were also asked to write a love letter to ourselves,
Mm.
and with our real addresses on them, so that the host would then send out the letters at some point during the year, and it would arrive on a day when it would hopefully be needed the most.
Oh, that's really nice. I love that. So, obviously, you don't have to say what you wrote to yourself, but did it feel challenging to write to your future self?
It didn't. I think because I do this, I kind of try to motivational self-talk myself a lot anyway. Like, I definitely have a lot of Peloton
You're like, you
millennial
go,
wisdom.
girl.
Yeah. Tomorrow is not promised. Live for today. You got this. So so I do try to live in that mindset, especially now when things feel particularly bleak. I think it is important to be like, okay, you are here, you are healthy, like Maslow's
Yeah.
hierarchy of needs.
Mm.
I am still personally, thankfully okay. And then so what can I do to help others? Like, that's the way I try to think about it. But it was really nice to be in person. And it reminded me a lot of when we had in-person events
Mhm.
before
I know.
before the pandemic. And it was, it reminded me too of how important it is to be in community with other people. And I know that you know that because of all the wonderful work that you do in your community.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Like, I think it's so funny because looking back at our corporate workplace journey, we were so heavily focused on in person for so long, and then it went so dramatically to the other end of the spectrum where it was all virtual all the time. And I do feel like the last couple of years has sort of been this slow creeping back into, oh, we should leave the house and put on what my husband and I call hard clothes as opposed to soft clothes.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
but I do think that going out of the house is good for you, and being in person with other people, especially being in a community with other people, is really important,
Yeah.
especially nowadays. I did not go to a networking event, but I did go to a protest this past weekend, basically, to protest ICE and what's been happening in Minneapolis and across the country, not just there, but especially there from this past week. And, it's certainly not the first protest I've been to over the last couple of years. It won't be the last, but it just is always a really good reminder of how, like, it is so important, right? And it can be scary, it can be joyful, it can be all the things, but it's really about connection. And, one thing which maybe it's a bigger topic that we can get into at a later time, but one thing that I did think was kind of interesting, and I'm curious how this played out with your networking event, but for the protest that I went to, like, I live in a really crunchy granola part of the country, to put it lightly, and, so, like, it's not surprising that a lot of people come out, but what was interesting, and it's a pattern I've been noticing more and more, is that there's a real age discrepancy with who's coming out. We have a couple high schools, including a really prestigious private boarding school right in town. There were no students or no kids, like, there was no one younger than probably, I don't know, like 30 there. There was maybe 1 or 2 kids, with their parents, but most of the people were old and elderly and infirm.
Mm.
A handful of 30s and 40s like myself. But it was really interesting, and it was something I was reflecting on afterwards, and I was like, what does this mean for, like, the future? And, like, what does this even mean for right now? And, like, is this playbook, or is this way of gathering or expressing our thoughts working? And I think from the standpoint of, like, the connection piece, it's still really important, but from the standpoint of, like, what are the goals out of it? I don't know. And so, obviously, networking in a professional capacity is a little bit different than what I was doing, but I am curious, like, if you saw, any patterns with who showed up to your event that you went to.
Yeah, obviously, it was much smaller and it wasn't politically motivated, but I will say, San Diego has always had a reputation of being purple to red, and I
Yeah.
would say that since Trump 1.0, it's gone more purple to blue,
Mm.
and in the neighborhood that I live in particular is, I call it the Brooklyn of San Diego, so it's very crunchy also. And so it's not like that topic specifically came up, but the energy and a certain things that entered the flames were definitely anti-MAGA sentiments.
Mm.
So that was encouraging. And the people that I spoke with were also very it was a real diversity of um people who were doing very different things. One woman was she's an urban planner working on bike paths in the city. Another one is really interesting. She was an executive director for a nonprofit that focused on um, assisted suicide, like
Okay.
end of life. And now she's actually running her own company to help doctors. Because I actually didn't know this, but in California, that is legal here.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and she was saying that a lot of Californians don't even know that it's legal, so she
Is
wants
it is it bad that I immediately thought, "Good to know"?
like, it's not. I mean, it's really interesting, right? There's actually several states. I thought it was just Oregon, but there are several states where it's legal, but it's not really talked about, and I totally hear you, I know. We are in a time when we think about what is the world going to look like and, and we don't wanna have to suffer
No, no. I mean,
unnecessarily. So that was cool, and then another woman who runs, like a Rage Her community here in San Diego, which is encourages, spaces where women can scream and throw
mm,
things in a nice safe space. So it was like a
very
really
important.
nice mix, yeah, and, an array of ages, obviously not under 21 given the group, but I hear what you're saying, and I think I've thought a lot about the the purpose behind protesting, what is the value, and I think a lot of it is in community, and, um, and I think that if it is about change, like true change, not to throw Chris's name of her of their their business in the space, but if it is about that, then what does it look like for younger folks to show up, and what does change look like? It might be something that's very different from protesting, because as we all know,
Yeah.
there's lots of different ways. I mean, one thing I think can really we I think about that we can all do is, like, lean out more of the
I
system.
know. Can I tell you, I've been wanting to get a landline again.
Oh my gosh.
'Cause I'm, like, so addicted to my phone, it's really bad, but, yeah, I mean, I think I agree with so much, and there's so much to talk about around everything you brought up. Really quickly, I was just watching a video earlier today about, again, the whole situation last week, and it was this white woman who was talking, and she was basically calling out the whole point around, like, how, for example, like, there's been so much discourse and reactions and just so much happening and being talked about, and, just a couple minor points to pull out. One thing was that a lot of folks have been talking about the practice of using the phrase "say her name," and how that's something that really
Mm,
originated for Black people and for Black women in particular because
mhm,
they so historically get overlooked and don't get the kind of attention, that people or white women do, and so, again, it's like this really interesting discourse that's been happening online where people have been saying, "Say her name," about Renee Good, and other people have been saying it's not to dismiss what happened to her, but that's not for
yeah,
her because we're all talking about it because she was a white woman who was acting as an ally, and then but what this person was talking about was basically like, this is what allies are told and taught about, especially white people, to use your bodies because it's not about saying you'll never get hurt or killed. The whole point of it is that if and when you do get hurt or killed, you will be highlighted and talked about because you are a white person, because it's breaking that mold essentially, and that this is one of our first steps into dismantling white supremacy. And I just thought that was so powerful, and it's kind of
mm.
like been sticking with me since the like hour or two that I've watched this video.
I
So I guess catch me tomorrow and see, but I think it will stick with me longer. But just again, like kind of taking that back down to like the smaller level, like my protest, like we're a really small city, 16,000 people. It's barely a city. It's like a town, right? Everyone knows everybody. It's very communal. And at the same time, like you still have to think about, hey, we could gather together and something could absolutely happen. And like, what is the purpose of that? And the purpose is to show that like we're not afraid, or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's we can be afraid, but we're still going to come together because it's important and it's powerful. And it's showing that even though, Black and brown people, indigenous people have been murdered and hurt and beaten and all the things for so long,
mhm.
if it's like, honestly, in my mind, I'm like, if this is what it takes, if we need white people, if we need allies to be experiencing the same kinds of things, like, if that's gonna be what it takes to start this dismantling process or to start people really coming together and building those coalitions and connections, like, I don't wanna say it's worth it, but I think it's just really powerful. It's a really powerful moment we're in, so.
I agree, and that I hope that her death isn't in vain. Um, I know this is, like, so heavy.
I know.
Um, I think honestly, I think the 2017 protests, all of those protests, and then the 2020 protests, I'm a little jaded. I have to say if I'm gonna be really honest, I am a little jaded about the power of protesting. I'm like, even watching what's happening right now in Iran is, like,
Mhm.
really wild. Like, I mean, wow. Talk about an iron fist. They don't care how many they kill. And how much does the world care? At the end of the day, it's the really interesting to see how this is all going to play out. And right now, I think you're right. I think our bodies are the things that at this point matter the most. And so how are we like showing up and using them at this time? So I think it'd be very interesting to see if what would happen if, 4% of us opted out of the system completely, which means, no shopping, calling in sick to work. Obviously, this is privilege, right? But many of us who can do it, just taking that time and like essentially going on a strike, going on a general strike, because unfortunately, I think the only thing that really people pay attention to is money. And so if it hurts their bottom line financially, then perhaps. But I think we're running out of time for that to matter as well. So, so heavy.
Well, with that in mind, let's Chris,
Let's
tell
talk
us
to this.
all the solutions to the terrible place that we're in. I mean, listen, obviously we recorded this with Chris, not this past week. So, I think we recorded one last month in December. So
Yes.
keep that in mind as you listen. But
Yes.
I think it's still an important conversation that is really relevant for where we are today and where we're going in
Definitely.
the future. And we don't know where that will be. So
Yeah, so get ready to hear more heavy conversations with them, so good times. Our lovely guest today is Chris Haigh, the founder of True Change Associates. We are so excited to have you here, Chris.
woohoo!
Me
Yet
too.
again.
I know it's been a long time.
It has been, I think, like 376 years, if my math is correct.
Give or take
Yes.
5.
Yeah,
Give or
I
take
think it's
5.
if
But there is another podcast episode out there with you, so actually any
Oh, yeah.
listeners who are listening should stop and listen to that one
Yes.
first, and then come back to this because I think a lot has changed.
That would
Just
be actually interesting. I should
oh.
listen to that. Wait, can we stop so I can go listen?
No,
That was
you
like 5 years ago or more,
oh,
At
no, that
probably.
was
least. Oh, it
more.
was more than 5 years
I
ago.
think it was like 2018 or something like that. So yeah, we'll
Okay.
definitely put it in the show notes. So no worries on that. So, for those who decided they don't want to listen to the other episode, tell us all about who you are.
Who am I?
Who are you?
I'm still discovering that. Well, I'm Chris Haig. I use they pronouns, and I run a consulting company called True Change Associates that I started just over 10 years ago now. Focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. And within my business, basically I've got a small number of clients where I work with more long term, and it really focuses on education, strategy, and coaching, actually. And so it's definitely whatever combination a client needs of that, from the strategy being assessment, visioning, goal setting, but also we need some education as we're doing this too, right? But I try to really do long term work with clients that help to move the needle a little bit, right? Um, and before that, I mean, I've been doing DEI work for hmm, quite a while now, as I think about my age. Um, like maybe 30 years
Like
at this
before it was
point.
called DEI, right?
Before it was called DEI, definitely. So it's definitely been an evolution to sort of be a part of it. Yeah, it's not like in high school, I was like, I'm going to be a DEI practitioner. Just
I
kind of
mean, I don't think that
it
that language
happened.
existed back
No,
then, right?
no. Yeah. So yeah, that's the quick snippet of me. You want
Well,
more?
we wanna get more into the beyond the snippets and into the good stuff. So, I
Okay.
mean, we kind of referenced this a little bit because we've known you for a while now, and obviously we've podcasted with you before, but what's changed for you since our last conversation? Which again, I think was probably 2018. I think you're right, Rachel, on that. So it's been a little bit of a blip. But maybe we can just start with like, where are you in the world right now, if you're comfortable sharing that? Like, where are you? How'd you get there? What's going on for you like right now?
Sure. I'm happy to start with where in the world I am because where I am right now is something I would not have ever thought of in 2018. I am living in Portugal now with my wife. We moved here last summer. But I do feel like I want to put that in context because of the current context. There are lots of people fleeing the country that is the United States for a lot of reasons, whether it be around immigration, trans, queer, whatever it is. There's a lot of people, and it makes sense, right? And as somebody that is a part of the trans community, I definitely have know a lot of people struggling and trying to figure out a place to be home and feel home and be comfortable. I think we lucked out being in Portugal because it wasn't like we were fleeing to come here, but we are in a place that is actually on some. If you look at some global indexes on LGBT rights, Portugal's ahead of the U.S. Just saying. But we ended up here because my wife and I are the entirety of our relationship, and we've been together 19 years now.
Wow.
We,
Congratulations.
oh, oof, we've always talked about living in Europe. Always. It's always been part of our conversation, but we've never were able to do it for whatever reason. 20 years ago, we were in different places. And then maybe, my wife was in grad school or I was starting a business or whatever it was. It just never worked out. But my wife is a teacher And so over the past few years, she's been really, burnt out, probably since COVID, and really struggling whether or not to find if teaching is still her home. And so about a year ago, this topic came up about Europe, and there's this whole international school circuit where people travel all over to teach. And we've heard though it's very, 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 very competitive, which was definitely an experience. So we're just like, why don't you just throw your name in a couple of a couple of open positions? Let's just see what happened. But we never thought anything would happen because it is so competitive. And last summer, she got offered a job in Portugal, and we moved 6 weeks later. And it was I would not even 6 months ago or 4 or 5 months ago, I couldn't have predicted this. So we are here because of that opportunity, which came to us at a time where we could do it, where we had the ability to do it. And my business was at a place where I could work from here and go home to the US when I need to. So I feel incredibly blessed and loved. But I want to be clear, I didn't run away. I do feel actually less anxiety. Actually feel pretty safe as somebody who's part of the trans community, but it doesn't mean my heart or my work is not still firmly planted in the U.S. And during these times. But um, I feel very blessed. So that's the biggest thing in terms of where I am now. Um, and then, did you want more like in terms of like how the business has changed, or
Yeah. Well, I just want to, before we even get into that, I
Mhm.
just want to just say, I really appreciate you naming that, you aren't abandoning the country as
Yeah.
it stands right now. And I understand that that comes from a place of like really honoring the fact that, some people are very privileged to be able to do that and a lot of people can't do
Yes.
that. And so I really appreciate your solidarity with those who frankly can't and so who are still at risk. We certainly talk about it too, I think, in some level. I really want to just shout out Felicia as well, for sort of doubling down on her community locally to do a lot of the work that she's doing to support folks and really being grounded there. And so I just want to name that because it does feel like it's a time right now where everyone's like, have certain identities, we do certain work, whatever, like, Felicia and I joke, like, we're probably on some list somewhere, like,
Oh, we're
Right.
definitely on the list.
it is a scary it's a scary, weird time, and so just wanted to honor that. But I would love to, talk about sort of how the work has shifted for you over, I mean, really since COVID, I would say, since 2020 and on, because I don't think we've really had an opportunity to sort of dig into that. What does that look like? Because there's been so much that has happened since then. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh boy. I don't know where to start with that. You're like, so much has happened since
yeah.
COVID. I think, a lot of us doing this work, like when COVID first hit, um, like I have this vivid memory because I used to have this whiteboard in my office and I would travel a lot for clients of getting an email that canceled something. And I would go up to my whiteboard and I would erase it. And then another email that something else was canceled. And then all of a sudden my whiteboard was empty. And I was like, oh my gosh. Right. And I know it wasn't just our industry, right? It was everybody so uncertain, but it was like, wow, like what is going to happen with this? And then obviously there became such a huge interest, I will say, because I don't know, some of it was, in the summer of 2020, right? Wait, sorry, my dates are all off, right? With George Floyd and all the other horrible tragedies that hit the news, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to sort of do this work, and it was such a range of people who were really intentional about it to performative to I mean, it was just the work just kind of exploded, and so I sort of got super busy again, I think you all did too, and then there's a lot of people also running in to do this work, a lot of consultants, some with expertise, some without, right? You just sort of try because there was a lot of opportunity, right? So equals dollar signs, right? In that sense, and it just exploded on so many levels, and there's so much work being done. But I think within when we think about DEI, it's something that has always been grassroots, has always evolved. You don't get and like. Like if you're going into business, you go get an MBA, right? And so So there's a lot of different ways of approaching this work, some good and some bad, and so it kind of made sense to me, kind of thinking about the backlash today that there's just so much happening, and I don't want to say the word unregulated because I don't think our work should be regulated, but I think there's so many misperceptions of what this work is and how we do this work, um, and so I think that has been a lot of my work is really trying to explain to clients exactly what I do, and if you sign up for me, this is what we're doing, um, and it's long term, and it's not one and done, and, your one keynote, during February is not necessarily gonna change culture, and so how do we actually get to the commitment? And so really sort of doing a lot of education on that, on what really works. Um I think too, during that time and since that time, what I've noticed, because like I said earlier, right, I do education strategy work and coaching. What I've noticed is an increase in ask for coaching, and specifically related to DEI. And I do think that has been a shift because also during this time of growth and interest of the work, there's also a lot of canceling, and there's a lot of and so there's a lot of people who are very honestly wanting to do this work, but are afraid, right? And don't wanna mess up and all that kind of stuff, but the reality is we're gonna mess up in this work, and so how do we create a safe or space where people can wrestle and be pushed, right, and sort of try to grow their confidence and their competency. So it's interesting. I've done a lot more coaching than I ever have over the past few years. Um, I mean, I guess that's where I would start, before getting to sort of the present day, but which is a whole 'nother conversation.
Well, I mean, let's talk a little bit about it. So,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, we talked before offline, off podcast about
Yes.
the last 5 years, especially, and all the wildness that's happened, and the influx of people, and then the abrupt, shoving out of the people, and
Right.
all the dynamics that you've touched on lightly here and there, and all that stuff. But I'm personally like I think it's interesting to hear that coaching around DEI specifically has actually grown for you in the last couple years
Yeah.
because I mean and you noted this yourself, but like there has been a backlash and we saw it on our end as early as I want to say what was it, Rachel, like mid 2023, I think we started seeing
Yeah.
it.
It's basically once
Um
affirmative action was overturned, that's
yeah.
basically when companies were like, "Oh, uh-oh."
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, I think hearing that and I don't know if it's on the individual level or if it is more organizationally, but hearing that there is still, like, a demand and it's actually grown for you is actually really, heartening to hear in a lot of ways. But I am curious because you did say, like, today, so
I know.
what's today? Like, tell me more in my best
Exactly.
facilitator style. Tell
I
me
know.
more.
Tell me more. It's the best phrase. But I wanna go back to one more thing around sort of the changes that get into this, because we're talking about, like, clients, right, wanting more
Yeah.
coaching for 'cause I forgot to say this earlier, but I think it's important. What I noticed too over that time, that window of time, was a lot of people in DEI roles desperate for support.
That
Like,
makes sense. Yeah.
they're, like,
Totally.
more so like, there's always been people in these roles, but all of a sudden, everybody decided they were going to have a chief diversity officer or something, and they were gonna put somebody in there, and sometimes they put people in those positions who had true, DEI experience, and not just the content, but also, you know, understanding organizational development and all that kinda stuff, and sometimes they just put people there based on an identity, right? And we've all like, that
Mhm.
has happened to a lot of people, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but there's been a lack of support, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not this you could go into that with passion and then change a company, right? You sort of have, and so a lot of people, and this was documented too, that the burnout rate was
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah.
And so you had all of these people who wanted to do good were lacking support. And so I think that is a big thing for just for our our industry, I don't even know if we can call ourselves an industry.
Well, I
Our
actually think we
profession?
should. I think we should
Okay.
call it an industry. I mean, and to your point
Okay.
earlier about, like, the regulation or deregulation or whatever, I mean,
Mm,
I agree with you, like, we don't wanna become, like, so tightly bound up because we
yeah.
wanna be expansive, but at the same time, like, it has been such a Wild West situation, but I think
Yeah.
that not calling it an industry in some ways does it a disservice because to your point, like and I know we talked about this so much, and so I don't wanna spend the rest of the time just getting into that rabbit hole, but to sort of, like, do the TLDR, like, especially in the last 5 years and with the influx of people, there were so many people who came in who had really great intentions, and a lot of them did really well, and a lot of them didn't do so well, and it wasn't through ill intent or,
No.
um, just trying to make a buck or whatever, but obviously money is part of it. We still live in a capitalistic society, but because so much of DEI work is centered around, like, identity, and because there was such an explosion of interest, we kind of, like, as an industry, quoting that aggressively, set a lot of people up to fail because
Yes.
we were like, "Oh, just because you look a certain way or you have this identity or you have this lived
Yes.
experience, you can do all these other things." And I know we have talked specifically between the 3 of us about the influx of people coming either just from, like, lived experience or from higher ed and nonprofit spaces into corporate. And I know your jam is higher ed and nonprofit, and our sort of space has historically been more on the corporate side. And I personally firsthand seen people who have been left out to dry because they
Yes.
came from different spaces and didn't understand the spaces that they were thrust into, and then didn't even understand how to navigate or advocate for what they needed because that support wasn't built in automatically. So, I think that's a really important dynamic, and I know, we've all talked about this ourselves, but it's just been it's been I think going back to the original point, like, if we don't call it an industry, then it just allows further nonsense,
Mhm.
honestly, to kind of
Or the
just run
nonsense.
wild in a
Right.
lot of ways.
Yeah. It was so complicated. There was good, bad, and ugly, right? And it's just it was so complicated. And back to us, like as a profession, and I will get to the present day. I promise. This will actually lead there. Like so, there was I don't know about you, but I was getting so many requests from people wearing these hats and these roles from all industries. Like how do I scale up, or how do I learn? Like where can I go for support? Like a lot of people are set up for failure. And I was having this conversation with a colleague of mine, um, who, dear friend too. Her name is Maria Marukian, and she was having the same thing. And so we a couple years ago tried to do like a program, a workshop, kind of built a community of just DEI practitioners. It's called Ember. And the first pilot was just unbelievable because we created a space where people would come together, do some education because we always need to, like, none of us in this work are done. Like we're not, I hate it when people call us subject matter experts because it implies we're done. Right. And so how do we do our education? But also how do we think about not just like the DEI context, but also organizational change, individual change, coaching, like all that. How do we actually work on a systemic level within an organization? But then also how do we find support and rely on each other, people that we can call out and stop thinking only about our industry, our one industry, like, how can nonprofit work with government, work with education, work with corporate? And so we sort of built that, and we ran 2 programs that were phenomenal, and people felt like this is what we needed. And so Maria and I decided, this was probably like 2023 to 2024. We decided, okay, we need to do something with this. Let's make a nonprofit. So we had a whole business plan, and we consulted with some funders and stuff like that. And we were about to turn the corner because we needed funding to do this. And we were about to turn the corner into actually having everything ready to ask for the funding, and that would have been Q1, quarter one of 2025.
Yeah,
And
and
is
we all
exactly
know that
right.
that was an amazing time to be doing DEI work. So I
And
don't
so, okay,
understand what the problem was. Tell what's the
we
I
deal?
just
love it.
like, literally, if we were 3 months earlier, we probably would have gotten the funding, right? And because all these funding consultants were telling us, "This is a sure, no problem." And then so the first that was our original goal. So January of 2025, and nobody would touch it. Nobody. because of what was happening with Trump and the sort of DEI backlash, if you will. So unfortunately, Ember is just kind of sitting there waiting for some love, but we have not let go. We're going to come back at some point when we can figure out how to fund and make it happen. But and if anybody listening hasn't, but I share that to say how the pendulum can swing, right? From literally 3 months before, we had all of these folks who knew all about funding who are like, no problem, you got this, right? To now, wow, to nobody, everybody is scared.
Yeah. Well, we thought
Right.
Kamala Harris was gonna be president because we had clowns saying they're eating the cats and dogs, and people are wondering why. Anyway, it's fine.
Well, I mean,
I
it's
wa
not fine, but
It's not fine. I just have to tell myself that or I just go into the covers. But, I wonder if do you think that if you positioned Embers in a different way, like, if you just stayed away this sort of goes to this idea of, like, changing the name. We've talked about this before where this wasn't always called DEI. Do you change it to sort of like still do the work, but just have it be called something else? Like, does that appeal to you? Or are you like, if we do this, then we're giving in?
Oh, um, I well, let me start with something you said. So it wasn't always called DEI, but it wasn't because there was an aversion to the language. It was an evolution of our understanding of the work. So it started as even before diversity, it was like multicultural, right? And so, like I don't like colleges had multicultural offices and things like that, right? And that was like getting everybody together and sort of celebrating everybody. And then as we sort of had a deeper understanding of identity, right, and how things worked, so it kind of came diversity, and then it came diversity and inclusion because diversity is not inclusion, right? So you can have the presence of difference, but it doesn't mean you have inclusion. And so now we're trying to create an inclusive environment. And then equity didn't come until I think after 2000. And I was psyched when it came because that was actually, there was more of an understanding that equity takes us to the systems level,
Yeah.
right? And you can't change this work until you change the systems. We can do all that we can to sort of be nice to each other and welcome each other and be inclusive with each other and build our skill set, but we need to look at the systems. We're talking laws, policy, ideology, all that kind of stuff. So equity came in early 2000 or so. And I remember with clients saying they wanted to add the E, and I was like, okay, sit down because I'm going to tell you what that really means if you want to add the E. And so there was more of an evolution of how DEI came. And so now with the backlash around language, I think it's very different in the sense of going back to these messy years of so many people doing this work, the lack of support, the setup for failure, all of this kind of stuff. There's a lot of frustration. There was cancel culture. There was all this stuff. And so a lot of people have felt it did damage. All of that did damage, right? And so it's not really working, so to speak. And so then to go to this place of, okay, we're not, DEI is illegal, which, um, what that says to me as you dive into this, when all of this was happening in 2025, I was reading all this stuff because I obviously do the work, but I want to know what is being said. And if you read it closely, it's basically not using DEI correctly. It's not using the word diversity correctly. It's not
Correct.
using inclusion. It's not using right.
well,
And
like, I'm
so,
thinking of like the critical race theory, like brouhaha,
oh
and it was like totally I mean, I don't even want to say a misunderstanding because it wasn't, but it was a
no,
total, just complete difference for what it
yeah.
actually was. So yeah, but
Nobody
sorry,
teaches
continue.
critical race theory to elementary school students. That is like that's just so all this
I mean, maybe they're like little tiny lawyers in training, but they're not. So
Well,
no.
isn't critical race theory a book that is written by anyone that isn't white? That's I believe what the understanding is.
What's oh
Or
man, we could talk
male.
the whole time about it's going back to systems and just understanding how laws you have to sort of sometimes take race into account if you look at the history of our laws in the US. Which we could do a whole semester course on that if you want.
Well, Chris, I have a very big question for you that I
Okay.
just thought of as you were
Uh-oh.
sharing. This is a really big one, so I
I'm
think.
Oh,
intrigued.
man.
Can
Chris
is
is
it
like, I'm scared.
is it are you ready? No. Is it possible to have the ideal DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, equity in a capitalist system, in a capitalist society? Is that even possible, do we think?
I think it's possible.
How?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, okay.
You're
But
like, well,
here's
damn,
I like your
this
optimism
podcast is
because
over.
no, like, I 100% think it's possible, right? There's always been something called compassionate capitalism and things so I think it is possible, but here's the thing, we have to figure this out collectively, right? We have to figure this out. So I can't just tell you if we do X, Y, Z, we're gonna be here, and this is what it's gonna look like, right? This has to we have to collectively define that and I'm thinking about emergent strategy, Adrienne Maree
yeah.
Brown's book, right? Sorry, what do
But
you got something to say, Rachel? I see it.
I know, well, it's just well, here's why I would push back on this, and I'm literally just thinking about this right now. Like, I'm literally for the first time, like, thinking this through is if capitalism ultimately is an extractive system, it is
Mhm.
by design extractive. You are extracting work, production, labor for the most amount of financial benefit. How can we have true equity in a system that is defined by that?
I don't think you have to practice capitalism that way, where you have such a divide between entry level and CEO. I don't think you have to practice capitalism that way.
Well, then well, then isn't that just socialism? I mean, like, don't we get to that point of where we're just talking about more
Mhm.
socialism? Because that's what that would be my argument is I think as long as we are in this capitalist system, is
Yeah.
this we're I feels like we're in this late stage capitalist society
Right.
in these death throes where it's like, let's extract and only think short term. I literally just had a conversation with someone who was like, it's really hard to do. We're talking about doing futures work and talking about what
Mm.
it's gonna be like. Felicia and I were talking with someone about this yesterday, talking about what your company might look like 10 years from now. But,
Yeah.
if any company is publicly traded or venture backed, they're thinking or certainly publicly traded, they're not thinking anything beyond the next quarter and how to
That's
extract as
true.
much profit
Mhm.
in the next quarter. So that's why they're not thinking about what's happening 10 years from now. So
Yeah.
and as long as they're the ones that are dictating the way we are all running things, then how do we get to this point? We need new government. Okay, goodbye. And now I'm done.
But what you said is we created this. We as humans created where we're at, so
Oh,
we as
yeah.
humans can create something else, and I think that's it. It is a capitalism or socialism. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's something brand new, and that's what we have to engage in possibility thinking for where we need to go. Like, I mean, this is liberation, right? Is thinking about it and then finding a way to sort of get there. And I could talk about liberation for a while too, right? So I don't know the exact answer, but I believe it, right? And I think I can't think of one right now because I wasn't prepared for this question, but
I'm
there are
sorry.
companies, where it is more flat, if you will. There's more profit sharing, whatever, and so there are rays of hope there, right? Of people, not everybody is sort of that evil. Um, I don't know. Everything's for the stakeholders,
The
CEO,
Death
and I'm going to
Star,
walk
the
away with
evil
billions of
empire.
dollars, right? And so I have to believe it's possible, and I think that's important.
I wonder if because this is such an interesting conversation. I wonder if because I think like I agree with you, Chris, to a large extent around like I think there needs to be perhaps something else, something new, something different. And if we are going to go back to, because I think one of the things that Rachel and I have, I don't want to say struggled with, but that we definitely wrestled with and like talked a lot
Mhm.
about, especially over the last several years, has been around this idea of like the fact that we are a capitalistic society. And, especially for all three of us, like we're all business owners. And so part of like what we were focused on is to make money. Like we have to make money to live in this
Make a
dumb
living,
society that we're living in.
Pay the bills.
And how do you like balance the equity work with like the fact that like
right?
we need clients and we need money and we need to like, make money and all that kind of good stuff. But I wonder if like if we're gonna if we're and actually let me just pause for a moment and go back to another thought, which is like I think like in the space where we have people who are engaged in this kind of work, like let's just call it like DEI practitioners, there
Yep.
is a really large range I've seen around people. Like some people are like, we'll just like conform and like we'll call it whatever and like we'll kind of like go along to get along. And then other people are like, we need to literally break everything and burn everything down. There's like
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
range, right?
definitely,
So and then I think
definitely.
like, we're probably somewhere in the middle of that. But like there's
Are we
definitely
though? Are we, though?
I don't know, but,
I don't know if I'm there.
for my point right now, like, there is a wide range, and I think that's also
Absolutely.
why people sometimes have different reactions because they're talking to someone who's, like, really more on, like, the compliance side, then they hear or they talk to someone who's like, "Burn everything down," and
I
it's a
know.
lot of extremes. But if we are gonna say, "Okay, we have this capitalistic society, and we're not gonna, like, just go full, like, society terrorist way and, like, burn everything and, like, rip everything apart," if we're gonna try to work with what we have, and there are definitely a lot of people who are in that sort of lane. If we're gonna try and work with what we have, because it is a capitalistic society, for the moment, I wonder if, going back to your point, Chris, if maybe some of that, like, trying to make it better, but still working within the confines is more about, like, um how do we sort of like extract the profit, but in a way that gives back? Because I think that's
Yeah.
part of the issue right now is like we have hoarding, right? So like I think about billionaires. And then
Right.
I was also like reflecting the other day about how, and I'm not saying this is good necessarily, but how back in the day we had these really wealthy people, like the Vanderbilts of the world, and people who were like definitely extracting massive amounts of profit, but
Yeah.
and I'm not saying again, I'm not, like, saying they were the pinnacle of what we should aspire to, but they were putting some of it back into
Right.
society. They were building libraries and buildings and roadways and public infrastructure and, like, schools and things, and so we don't we're not really seeing that today. We're just seeing rich people getting richer and not giving anything
Yeah.
back, and instead being like, "Fuck everybody. We're gonna replace you all with robots, move to Mars, and make tons of money." So I
Yeah.
wonder,
Build
like, there's
bunkers.
a ground if we're gonna work within a capitalistic framework, is there a space where there is a possibility to have some kind of, like, we're gonna, like, make money, but it's gonna, like, go back in? I don't know, and then that's just a question
Yeah.
I'm, like, thinking about right now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think, when you said we're not seeing them today, I would, and I don't know the answer to this, but I would challenge that and saying, I just think we're seeing all of the negative, right? I guarantee there are companies and organizations and people who are running organizations in a respectful, inclusive, equitable way. They exist, but they never get the headlines. They never get the news, right? But you're also at the same time, how wealth inequality is absolutely sickening. It's absolutely horrible, right? I mean, how many billions do you need, really? So, like, yeah.
I mean,
So we're just
I'll
kind of,
take a few. I think it'd
yeah.
be helpful with a couple.
So we are stuck in that, absolutely. But I think I know that there are examples out there of how to do this better.
There absolutely are. There are incredible companies and organizations that are doing things. There are a lot of worker-owned, employee-owned, companies, co-ops that are out there, but the number is actually shockingly small, like, it's in the thousands. And it's worth noting that it's it's so hard for these companies to do it. This is where it's like,
Yeah.
it's very interesting to me because I'll give you an example. When Felicia and I started getting employees, we had talked about doing an employee-owned, worker-owned co-op
Right.
system.
Right.
And the advice we got from our lawyer is, "Please, for the love of God, do not do that."
Don't do that.
And
Systems. Systems.
systems, exactly. This is my point. It is, it is w it's like such a big hill to climb. So I give so much credit for the companies that are doing good and that don't need to feel that extractive, pull, that these systems are designed to create. So, it is a real deep challenge, and I'm sorry that I took us down this scary
No
rabbit
worries
hole.
about it. Yeah. But you are what you just said is exactly why we need to keep doing this work, because these are when we talk about equity, those are the systems we need to change, and it takes p- more than 1,000 companies of doing that. Right? It take like there's actually, even if you think about the stock market, like there's more people investing in socially responsible companies now than there ever have been, and so it's there are, but it hasn't changed yet. It hasn't. So we have to keep doing it. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's tricky because I don't mean to be a negative Nancy. Look, I am very excited about the possibility of living in a better world. So I won't go down the whole ESG rabbit hole. but I would love to just switch to a interesting little nugget that might take us to another little place, and I'm just
Another black hole?
another little black hole, uh, that Felicia and I have noticed, and I'm curious, we're both curious about you how so sorry, we're definitely going off script. We're like, "Let's just ask her them questions."
We're doing it.
We're doing these weird
That's fun
questions.
questions.
Yeah, well, hopefully this will not be I promise this will not be about, like, challenging our current system. But what we have found is that there has been an interesting trend with the folks in that do our work, lately that are going more into sort of these other little realms, like, that are a little bit more woo. And I don't know if you have seen this trend with any, because I know that you work with so many people, like, sort of a different group of folks, but we've seen people that sort of are, like, doing more around, like, breath work, somatic, which but also, like, you know, manifesting and time travel and, like, magicians and, like, it's a whole thing that it's
Mhm.
just been really interesting to see people sort of, like, diving into this space. I'm curious if you've seen any of that or you're like, "What the hell are you talking about right now?"
A little of both, but, um I mean, I think I work with some colleagues who often will bring in, a piece of breath work or something into a workshop or a facilitated space because it kinda it calms the nervous system, right? And this work is hard. So I've always seen pieces of it throughout, but to that extent, I have not, but also I don't know much about all of those mediums, but I do know a lot of them been around for a really long time, right? And so I can't speak on it, to be honest, because it's not something I dove into. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
which I think
I do believe, like, the body like, when I talk about this work, there's a lot of people that are so quick to just solution figure out the answer, right? And I'm always talking about this is head and heart work. Like, and
yeah, I
so
know
the
that's like one
heart
of your
means
favorite phrases.
yeah, the
Love
heart
it.
means this is body work too, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it connects to that in some way, from my perspective. But I would love to learn more about how it's being used, but I'm not
Well,
sure it's something I'll bring into my
we
research.
definitely have some other podcast episodes that you are welcome to listen to because we have time traveled
Fantastic!
this year, Chris. We've gone down this woo rabbit hole, but it actually it's interesting because it kind of connects to something you mentioned just a little while ago, which was I forget what was it was in the context of because COVID brain already, but
Yeah,
you did say something about possibility thinking, and I
yeah,
think that's where a lot of it is coming up, at least in sort of how I've been seeing it, is around a lot of folks, whether or not they're directly involved in, like, DEI work or not, I think especially folks from minoritized or marginalized communities who have been feeling a lot of weight and brunt of, all the crap that we've been dealing with, especially the last couple of years, have been
yeah,
feeling like there's gotta be something else out there, and I think, to point to our conversation we just had around, like, capitalistic societies or not, like, I think a lot of people are, like, looking for something different, and so the woo, if you will, is, like, maybe providing people alternative pathways to, like, even just get into a mental framework around, like, what else could we or how else could we be thinking about stuff, but, like, we've been doing a lot of research around, like, futures thinking and futurism, and I think the idea of, like, allowing ourselves to open up to other possibilities is
yes,
a big piece of that. So I actually think whether or not you're, like, full woo or not, you are engaged in a piece of it too to some extent because it's exactly that, right? It's like, how do we tune in, but also open up to other ways of being? And that's what so much of this work is about, right? It's like saying, here's where we are right now. Here's where we wanna be, but also here's another place that we might wanna be that we've never thought about before because 'cause we've never allowed ourselves to think about it,
right,
right?
yeah.
Is that does that ring true for you, or am I just
Oh,
totally making this up
definitely,
for
and so
you?
well, in that case, it's not new in that sense because if you think about liberation and liberation work, and so many folks, especially women of color, have written about that, talked about that. I mean, forever, right? And so anything I've learned, I'm standing on the backs of that, right? And so maybe more of this more openness to woodness is also a rejection of whiteness and white supremacy, but also I'm also like, are we co-opting it too? Like I'm also kind of like, what's happening here, right? There's so many dynamics there, but this idea of liberation theory, possibility thinking. This is not new. This has always been around. And so it's really understanding that the world that we live in right now, right, is what we live in right now, but we have to sort of believe and understand that we will get to another place, but also so it's a vision for where we're going, but also it's about liberation in the current moment, meaning as I'm working towards this place, in this moment, I could create a liberatory environment with you. And so I'm creating the vision into being right now. Right. And so there's this it's funny, I saw this article not that long ago about creating psychologically safe islands, where because there's just so much and there's so much tension everywhere, and it's really hard even in companies to sort of have a healthy culture because there's so much going on. And it's going to take a lot of work. So this article was like, how do we find our islands that are psychologically safe? And this was very much focused on the workplace. And I was like, well, this is liberation thinking. Like, so I'm a manager at a company and I've got 10 direct reports. I have complete control of how the relationship I build with them and how I support them, how I help them navigate systems, how I advocate for them, how I make them feel, and then in turn, how well they do their job. Meaning, if you can find this liberated psychological space, you do better work. So I think these concepts have been around, but I think honestly, of all the things I teach, it is really hard for people to go to a place of liberation thinking. It's really hard for people to go to a place of possibility thinking.
Yeah, we had certainly found that too.
Yeah,
But
I
it
get it.
it is interesting because even just how you were describing the psychological safety islands right now, like, I was just thinking back to I actually literally it's so funny. I literally right before this podcast started, I sent a message to one of my former bosses at a previous company because a Facebook memory popped up for me, and it was, like, a little fun thing where just, like, a quick side note, like, he really loved, I don't know, he had, like, a weird picture, like, with a Viking hat with, like, the horns, and, like, we just ran with it for, like, branding back in the day, like, the early to mid-2000s when company branding departments weren't super strict about what you did. So we did all this, like, marketing material for it, and then we had as a, like, gag joke for, I think, his birthday or something, like, we all printed out, like, head things of it, so everyone, like, gathered together, and we all had, like, his head on a stick. But anyway, so I just sent a message, and I was, like, checking in, and I was just thinking about that because, like, I've had good and bad experiences, but I've had experiences that I think speak to what you were just saying around, like, that psychological safety island where I remember thinking, like, "Ooh, this, like, department or the company or the team is, like, not, like, I don't know about this," but, like, in my tiny little, like, team island, like, I feel really good and really safe and, like, the values align and, like, I feel like I'm doing good work, but then, like, if I swim over to this island, it's really
Yeah.
different, and I don't know about that. And I think that's so important to, like, remember that we like, because I think a lot of this time like, a lot of the time when we talk about these big concepts like liberation
Yes.
and possibilities and all this stuff, part of what I think might deter people who are sort of maybe, like, just casually engaging to a point is that it feels too big. It feels like
Mhm.
it's too much. And so I love what you were saying because I think that it's like a reminder that we can actually get to some of these concepts at a very small level or, like, not I don't wanna say small level, but, like, a very intimate or, like, localized level, and it doesn't have to be so transformative right away necessarily, but that actually could be transformative long term because, like, this was at least 10 years ago, if not longer, that I was on this team with this person, but I'm still connected in a way, and I have, like, this positive relationship because of the experiences that I had back when I was, coming up in my career. So, I love that idea. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, if we all did the hard work of trying to create these spaces in all of our spheres, that's what creates the ripple, right, of change. And so, and that's always been true, right? And it's hard work. I think so often we point our fingers. We point our fingers at the CEO, we point our fingers at the president, we're constantly doing that, and, but we do have control in our immediate space. And I'm not saying this is easy. Gosh, if this work were easy, we would see equity and inclusion, right? And so it's really hard work, but we have control in these spaces, and so that's often through my business, I'm working with leadership teams around that. Like, what do you have control of? Um and what can you create? And back to this question around like DEI, do we use it or not? Like, honestly, like what I teach is understanding the essence of these words. If you understand what D and E and I truly mean, your context is going to dictate what words you're going to use. Because if your context means you won't get any grants for, or your business, your nonprofit will go out of business, fine, use a different word. I don't care. I, however, will not be using different words because to me, it's just about teaching what it really is.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I'm in a room with people who are all grumbly about what this is and I break it down, it just makes sense of what it is, right? It is because most people want to see others succeed.
Yeah. It's like, how feminism is a dirty word for people, and it's like, well, if
Right.
you actually understood what it meant, it's not
Right.
power over, it's power with, like,
Right.
you would be maybe a little
Yeah.
more
Power
inclined
wins.
to
That's
accept it.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's I mean, that's but I will never shame anybody for switching the language because everybody's context is so unique. We live in
Yeah.
such a complicated time.
Yeah.
Um, and so what people need to decide what they need to do for their context in terms
Yeah.
of the work. But I wanna say too, there are a lot of companies that heels in, we're doing this work, but we don't hear about these organizations, right? Um,
Yeah,
and
because
so
they don't wanna say anything.
that's the problem with our news and our news
Yeah.
cycle, right? It sort of is like there's so much static. And so,
Yeah.
and yes, things are shit. I mean, things are horrible for so many people. So many people are afraid. I mean, we're talking life-threatening situations for I 100% understand that.
Yeah.
And we have to know that there are a lot of people doing good work helping people, it's still there. Like, it's not disappearing. This work is not disappearing. This work is not old. It is going to still be there.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing I would add to that too is, which has always helped me, and I'm sure I've talked about this before, but, I, one of another colleague of mine, Dr. Carmen Foster, child of the civil rights movement, lives in Virginia, historian and all things sort of race related, amazing, amazing woman. But she calls it, so I'm stealing this from you, Carmen, the time space continuum. She's like, we have to remember the time space continuum. And of course, we're like, what is that, Carmen? Right. And the whole thing, and this isn't a new concept, but it's important to remember, is if you think about the entirety of our time, right, on this planet, what's happening today is a blip.
Mhm.
Right, and so I've seen her go to a whiteboard and just write all of this stuff that has happened, going back to e the beginning of our country, but it's even longer for other countries, right? And so that arc towards justice is moving, but yeah, it has a dip sometimes and it goes back up, and has a dip and it goes
Yeah.
back up, and so, I'm not saying it's easy now, I'm not saying that at all, but we have to understand the trajectory of this work, and whenever I see her do this or talk about this, it helps me understand that, okay, my place is to keep that arc moving. And if
Yeah.
I'm keeping that arc moving in my islands of psychological safety, I'm still moving that arc. And eventually it's going to tick back up again, just like it did a couple of years ago. It's going to go up and down as we go. And so this blip in time, and that also leads to liberation, which understanding that what we live in today is 500 years in the making.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take hundreds of years to undo. So what can I do right now in my power to create these inclusive, equitable spaces and know that I'm going to then pass the baton to somebody else because I have received the baton from many powerful people who have always been doing this work. And there
Oh,
will always be people doing this work.
oh, you are such a beacon of light and hope, and I love it. And I know that we have just a little bit of time left, so I wanna just ask you one more question, which is because Felicia and I are doing a lot of thinking about the future of work, so I want you to think about what it looks like 10 years from now.
Oh God.
What if you could imagine it, what do you see in your crystal ball?
Mm. I see us with a better handle on all this AI nonsense right now. I mean, that is the future. And I think what's happening is sort of the science, the was going to say like the happy endorphins from like these discoveries. Like it's just like flying out of control, but we haven't had the conversation. What does this mean as people? And all that stuff, right? And so I feel like we're going to get more of a balance on it. I'm not afraid of AI. I am afraid of us not having the conversation to intentionally about what it is going to do, and what that means for humans, for workers, all that stuff. And so I am definitely being optimistic that we are able to get to better conversations on this. Um, but I also think, I hope and think that in 10 years there's a lot more breakthroughs too, whether it be around medicine, education, all that kind of stuff. And so I think, I don't know, it is going to look different. It's going to look futuristic. But we have at some point, hopefully in the next 10 years, we start talking about the humanity of it all. And so I'm going to be optimistic about that. I think DEI work is still going to be present. Maybe it's called something else, but it's the idea of, how do we create spaces where all humans thrive,
And
period.
robots.
And robots. The robots
I'm
don't take
sorry.
over like a movie.
Not if we treat them
Justice
well.
for robots.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
See, right? What is consciousness?
We'll
Oh my gosh.
see.
Wow, I
I'm
know. I'm so
retiring
sorry.
then,
I
so
really feel like this was, I've led us down some wild spaces, so I apologize. I really do, Chris. You're
Yeah, what
so
just happened?
wonderful. I don't know. I read some headlines right before we got on this, and that was my bad. This is a good lesson for me to meditate prior to a conversation.
So next time I do a podcast, I should send you some headlines.
Yeah, oh my
Yes. Oh my God,
gosh.
that'd actually be very fun. Let's do it.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering if now that we know that you're thinking a lot about AI and its ethical use and how it plays with humans, maybe we can have you back on and maybe just have more conversation around, like, what we can do to help further that conversation in little bits and pieces.
Sure, I'll be honest, I don't know,
That's okay.
but
No, that's okay.
I
No one
None of us
does.
know.
No
We're
I'm
one knows.
curious
confident
now.
that if we have intentional conversations as humans, we can figure it out.
That's what
Yeah.
this is what intentional conversation. This is what we're gonna
Yep.
call it, intentional conversations about
Love it.
and humans.
Uh, it's always a delight and a pleasure, Chris. If people want to learn more about True Change You, where can they find you?
Um, Send me an email. How's that? Chris at truechangsassociates.com.
Amazing.
All spelt as it should, and
We'll
it's
put it in the show
Carmen.
notes, but
Um,
lovely.
I have a very, 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 very old website I never updated, so please don't go there. And I am not on social media a lot, which is people are like, "What? That's crazy!" I'm like,
That's probably
Cool.
for the best. In all
Very
honesty.
healthy. Very
I am
healthy.
fully on social media. That's not going to change anytime soon, but I think you are doing the right way. So,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much,
so
Chris.
much.
This was wonderful.
Oof. All right. Well, thank you so much for sticking with this conversation with us. We did it. We hope you enjoyed listening to our interview with Chris as much as we enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for listening. And please don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe. It makes a huge difference in the reach of this podcast and by extension, this work. Visit us on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn and sign up for our newsletter at inclusiongeeks.com/newsletter to stay up to date on all things Inclusion Geeks. Stay geeky, friends.
Bye.
This podcast was edited by Resonate Recordings.